Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I am so excited to be running down my top 50 board games of all time. In this video, I'm going to be going from 50 to 41, and even though this is the bottom of the list, these games still represent like the top 5% of all games I've ever played. This is the cream of the crop. These are all games that I think are must-plays. I'm very excited to get started, so let's just jump right in with my number 50. Coffee Roaster. This is a quirky, quick-playing, solo-only game where you're just attempting to brew the perfect cup of coffee. It's a bag builder, so you start with a bag of chips that are just really bad, uncooked beans, just other nasty stuff in there, and then each round you're going to be pulling chips from the bag and roasting them, making them better. We're trying to remove all the bad stuff, add in some good stuff, different flavors and aromas, things like that. You have these different special abilities that you can use to help you kind of manipulate the chips. And then you put the chips back in the bag, shuffle them up, and draw more out and do the same thing. And you just keep doing that until you decide to stop. You think your bag is in good shape. And then you actually brew your cup where you're pulling the chips out one by one, trying to get certain values, trying to have certain chips show up. It's a very unique game. The theme really comes alive, and the mechanism here of pulling the chips out of the bag and trying to get the right numbers to show up, it's really satisfying and fun. So that's my number 50, Coffee Roaster. Number 49 is Dominant Species. This is a heavy worker placement and area control game where you take the role of a species. Maybe you're the insects, maybe you're birds, maybe you're mammals, and you are trying to spread across the land, taking over these different hexes and having dominance over them. This is actually an area control game at two different levels. You want to have the most pieces on a hex so that you have control of it in order to gain points, but you also want to have the most dominance. And that basically goes to whichever species has the most food, is the most comfortable, can survive the easiest on a particular hex. Because there's these little food bits spread all around, and your species can only eat certain things. And so as your actions, you may be moving around the map, adding pieces, attacking other pieces. But you also might want to adapt your species to be able to consume different food. You might want to explore to expand the map. You might want to add different food onto the map that your species is better at eating. So there's all this stuff going on. It's incredibly in your face, mean, chaotic, but extremely dynamic and fun, highs and lows, and a ton of agonizing decisions. The theme really comes through in this one, and that's why it's my number 49, Dominant Species. Number 48 is Agra. This is another heavy worker placement game, but I feel like this one has flown under the radar a little bit. In many ways, this is a really typical heavy Euro game where you're managing resources, producing them, converting those resources into other resources in order to get points. The twist here is that there are just so many resources. There's something like 16 different resources that you're dealing with here, doing these long conversion chains. The whole board, in fact, is just one big, like, a resource tree where you can just convert one thing into another, and then that thing into another thing, all to trade to get points or build buildings. And there's this really unique and clever system where you can lay your workers down in order to get meditation points in order to do additional actions. There's a ton of clever stuff going on here. And if you like a sort of a typical medium to heavyweight Euro, then I think this will be one that you should really check out. That's number 48, Agra. Number 47 is Ghost Stories. This is a classic, brutally difficult, cooperative tower defense game. You're moving about a 3x3 grid of tiles, which represents this village that you're protecting from just waves of spirits and ghosts. And you're either taking the action that's on the tile or attacking an adjacent spirit. As the spirits come out, they have special abilities, and it just feels so relentless as they're constantly showing up, causing other spirits to come up, attacking the different tiles. It's very brutal. It's one of those cooperative games where it just feels like things start bad and just slowly get worse and worse and worse. But I love it, and it has some of the best artwork in board gaming, in my opinion. Actually, I just love the way this looks on the table. That's my number 47, Ghost Stories. Number 46 is Tash-Kalar, Arena of Legends. This is an abstract game, one that you can play with up to 4 players, but I really only play it with 2. That's how I prefer it. And it's got that really common theme of like 2 mages dueling with each other in an arena, but it does it in a very different way than any other game that I've played. You're essentially putting out tokens onto the board, trying to create patterns that are on cards in your hand. Once you've created that pattern on the board, you can play the card and do its effect. And it might attack your opponent's pieces, get some of those off the board, or it might like let you put down more powerful pieces, upgrade pieces, move pieces around. And you're doing all that in order to try to complete these objectives that are beside the board, which might involve any sorts of things. Having pieces on certain spots in the board, maybe creating lines or groups, maybe destroying a certain number of your opponent's pieces, things like that. And completing those objectives gives you points, and points is how you win. You're not just trying to defeat your opponent, you have to complete these missions. And it's all about trying to combo up those shapes, right? Creating a certain shape on the board lets you play a card that lets you create another shape so you can play another card. It's that sort of thing. It's so satisfying when you like pull off one of these shapes and you get to play a card and have some big effect. It's very tense because you're worried that your opponent might come in, see what you're doing, ruin the shape that you're creating. It's one of those very unique abstract games where the theme actually kind of comes through, and it doesn't really feel like you're playing an abstract game. I think this one's brilliant, and also another one that, just doesn't get talked about as much as I think it deserves. So that's my 46, Tash-Kalar. My number 45 is Rajas of the Ganges. This is a worker placement / dice placement game where you're using dice as resources in order to take a host of different actions that involve building a little village on your board. You get these building tiles, you have to sort of connect up the roads, and on those tiles are different buildings which you can then use to do trade, to get resources. And this game, I think, is one of the first to do this really cool thing where you have 2 tracks. One that's tracking your money, and one that's tracking essentially victory points. And they're going in opposite directions around the track. And the winner of the game is the person who can be the first to have those 2 markers cross. So it means you can really focus on just getting a ton of money and just a few sort of victory points, or you can focus on victory points and not have as much money, especially since you're often spending money in order to get those victory points. Or you can kind of do a balance of the two, because it doesn't matter where they meet, they just have to meet. And that's really cool. It means that you can explore different strategies. Since this game has come out, other games have taken this and used this, but this was the first game that I played that did that, and it's really satisfying and fun. This game also has a ton of little modular expansions that you can add, so you can have a lot of replayability with this one. So it's definitely one of my favorite medium weight Euros. That is my 45, Rajas of the Ganges. Number 44 is Neuroshima Hex, 3rd edition. This is another abstract game that doesn't really feel like an abstract game. Each player takes a different post-apocalyptic faction, and these factions are extremely different. They have different tiles, different special abilities. You're drawing some pieces out of a bag, and then you're placing them on the map, and these pieces are usually either buffing adjacent tiles or attacking adjacent spaces, usually on certain sides, so the facing really matters, and they have a speed. And you just keep placing these tiles on the board until someone plays a battle token. And when that happens, you just resolve the entire board at that point, going in initiative order. So I might have a piece that is super fast, attacks one of your pieces, destroys it before it can take out one of my other ones. And usually it's just carnage, just pieces, like the whole board just gets wiped out. And then you go again until someone else plays a battle, and then you do it again. And you're just trying to get enough hits on your opponent's headquarters to defeat them. It's so great, and there's just so many different factions that have these really cool twists to them that really change up the game. It makes for infinite replayability. This one's also a classic at this point. That is my number 44, Neuroshima Hex, 3rd edition. Number 43 is Keyflower. And there's a lot of classics on this part of the list, and this is one of them for sure. This is an extremely clever worker placement auction game where there are a bunch of tiles in the middle of the table, and you are using your workers to either place on the tile to activate the special ability of that tile, or beside the tile in order to bid for the tile. Because at the end of the round, you're going to get to take any tiles that you've won into your own personal little village that you're building out. And then ultimately you're using these tiles to get resources in order to upgrade the different tiles that you're adding to your village for points. And one of the clever twists is that you have 3 or 4 different colors of workers. And once someone places a worker onto a tile, either onto it or bids for it, whatever color that worker is now, that's the only color that can then be used to interact with that tile. You're essentially painting that tile in that color. So I might have a lot of red workers. If I put a red worker there and you don't have very many, then you're not going to really be able to do anything with that tile. And that sort of play can make this a really cutthroat, mean game. You can also like send workers to other players' villages and use their tiles before they do. You're kind of gifting them that worker, but if they were counting on using that tile, that can really mess them up. It's a really cutthroat, brutal game, actually. It doesn't seem like it would be, but it's very interactive and extremely, extremely clever. So that's my number 43, Keyflower. Number 42 is Nemesis. This is unofficially Aliens, the board game. You play either cooperatively or semi-cooperatively or solo. And you basically wake up from like some sort of cryo sleep on this derelict spacecraft that is infested with aliens. And each player has a secret objective. And so you may need to go and check out the engines and fix them so the ship starts working again. You may need to check the navigation systems and redirect the ship to Earth, or maybe away from Earth, depending on your objective. You may need to unlock the escape pods and escape the ship, right? Different things like that. And when you're playing semi-cooperative, you might even have objectives that want you to make sure that other players die. And you're just moving around the ship, exploring these different rooms, but as you move, you're making noise. And if you make too much noise, then aliens will jump out and you have to attack them or run away. This absolutely nails that, aliens, sci-fi horror feel. It's got everything you want, and the art and all the miniatures and everything are really fantastic. Love this game. That's my number 42, Nemesis. And my number 41 is Spirit Island. This is an incredibly popular and well-loved heavy cooperative game, which a lot of people love playing solo as well. And it's got this really fantastic theme where you play as spirits trying to protect an island and its native inhabitants from colonial invaders. Uses a really cool card system where you have slow actions and fast actions, and so you can play some cards to take some fast actions before the invaders activate. Then the invaders activate, and then you can play your slow actions to try to respond. And the invaders have this like 3-step process where they come onto the land and expand, they build buildings, and then they blight the land. And so you're trying to wipe them out before they can do all that stuff. and also spread fear amongst them to try to get them to go away. Lots of really clever stuff here. Incredible decisions. I'm really bad at this game, actually, but it's very fun. There's tons of satisfying moments, different things you can pull off. And I just love how many things you can add to the game to change the difficulty or just change around how things work. There's just a ton of replayability and challenge in that box. And it's refreshing to have a heavier cooperative game where most co-ops tend to be a little bit lighter. So it's easy to see why this is so well loved. That's my number 41, Spirit Island. So there you go. That is the bottom 10 of my top 50. Quite a few classic games in there, quite a few heavier games in there as well, and a few co-ops. So a pretty good mix there. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out my 40 through 31. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.